Welcome to Art Traffic. Let's get going.
I think that's important, is that sometimes artists get too serious about what they're doing, and you gotta, lighten up a little bit.
Yeah. This week we have an interview that I've been looking forward to because we have someone on the show that has been integral to the LA art scene for a long time now, Norm Laich. This interview has been a long time in the making because Norm has been super busy preparing for the show that is currently up at ICALA, This Brush for Hire, which contains work that have been fabricated by Norm for other artists. Not too many people outside of the art world are very familiar with the fine art fabrication genre, but those who are know Norm as someone who has made works to the specifications of Mike Kelley, John Baltasari, Meg Cranston, Ed Ruscha, just to name a few. Go see the show at ICALA, you won't regret it. It's been a few weeks since we posted a new episode, but this is worth the wait. This is Art Traffic, episode 16, Norm Laich.
And I lived in Detroit until I was 27, with a break in Toronto for a few years going to art school there.
Oh, I hadn't realized that's where you went to school.
Well, I started out with going to school downtown Detroit at it's called the Center for Creative Studies near the Art Institute, Detroit Institute of Arts.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there for a year, but then I heard about the school, Ontario College of Art in Toronto, which is supported by the Canadian government, so the tuition rates were lower than the private school in Detroit.
Yeah.
And also they had an experimental art department that was doing video and impermanent art and installation pieces. In Detroit, it was just the basic painting and sculpture departments.
Yeah.
There was a teacher named Michael Snow that made a big impact on me, who was teaching there.
And I take it he was more on the experimental side.
Yeah, I was in the experimental art department.
Yeah, that seems way more you.
Yes. And they based it on Cal Arts. When they'd have faculty meetings, they'd let me sit in on them, and they'd be talking about what they're doing at Cal Arts in the meetings, like Baltasari and Mike Lasher and Douglas Hubler and those type.
Is that
people.
what made you eventually come out to LA?
No, this was quite a bit before I decided to move to LA when I was in Toronto. I had no clue I was going to move to LA when I was living in Toronto. I thought I would be either living in Toronto, which would turn out to be impossible because you have to have a student visa.
Yeah.
And if you want to live in Toronto, you have to have a job that a Canadian can't do, that sort of thing.
Right.
So that didn't work. So I ended up back in Detroit and working for commercial sign companies. But I got bored with living in Detroit after living in Toronto. Toronto is more cosmopolitan and more diverse.
Right.
Detroit's basically white.
Yeah.
White suburbs surrounding a black ghetto.
Yeah.
And also it's an industrial auto factory town, so that the culture there was basically going to bowling alleys at night.
So what years was that when you got back to Detroit?
From 76 until I moved here in 83. And after a while, I was getting so isolated in Detroit that I decided I had to go back to school and get a degree so I could move somewhere else and work in the art world somewhere else. So I did get a degree at Eastern Michigan University, where I took all the basic requirement type courses.
Yeah.
That I didn't have at art school, where art school is more all art classes.
Yeah.
And I took a course in art management, where I was combining business training with art training to eventually be a administrator of an art organization or run a organization like a theater or dance company or gallery. I was an intern at the university art gallery, and I also helped run the student gallery too when we were at Eastern Michigan. It was in Ypsilanti, which is near Ann Arbor, and we called it Ipsitucky because it was
Ann Arbor's small enough.
Yeah, but Ypsilanti was Eastern Michigan, and that was the University of Michigan. Eastern Michigan was more the poor man's school to go to, as opposed to the University of Michigan, which was like the
Yeah, sure.
One of the top ranked universities
right
in the country.
So you have like a real sort of what I would call like a punk rock DIY sort of aesthetic and sort of the way you do things. Like you really do not pay any homage to convention at all. Like if you have a piece that, it seems to me, but it seems like if you have a piece to do in your mind, you're going to do it no matter what. Was that an influence of yours? Was that punk rock?
Definitely. Yeah, because I grew up as a teenager listening to underground rock in Detroit.
Yeah.
They had underground rock then on radio stations as opposed to like the top 100 Billboard hits and stuff.
Yeah.
So there were bands like the MC5 and the Stooges and Alice Cooper that were real exciting. And that was really the only exciting thing going on in Detroit at the time.
So just bowling alleys and then
industrial rock music. That was pretty much it. Well, of course, if you could like become part of the black community, that'd be another way to get some cultural input as far as Motown and psychedelic funkadelic.
Sure.
George Clinton was in Detroit for a while and stuff like that. Talking Heads would come there and play with George Clinton's band, which was pretty cool. Parliament Funkadelic. Yeah. High school, I got interested in looking at art form, and I was interested in the more experimental work. And the teachers would encourage that. One teacher in particular would encourage me to look at that kind of work.
Yeah.
And that's why I went to Toronto, is because that was more like that kind of approach, the new genre, not just regular painting and sculpture, but more spread out, more options. If you have an idea, there's it isn't just painting or sculpture. You have these other options of how to realize the work.
Yeah.
So, and it made you feel like, oh, you're part of this revolution of something being new, which is exciting.
Yeah.
I had professors at these schools, especially in Ontario or Toronto, where they would rail against precious art and art on a pedestal, like the museum being a shrine for art in a negative way.
Yeah.
Comparing the art to religion.
Yeah.
In a negative way. I mean, art is being too spiritual, not enough about the real world. Because a lot of that installation art had moving, like earth art, moving bulldozers, moving earth around, like Michael Heiser type.
Sure,
approach.
Or stuff that's real temporary. Smithson, yeah.
And it had more of an urban edge to it too. And growing up in the suburbs, I hated the suburbs, so I was more drawn toward urban culture also.
So fast forward to the 80s when you get out to LA. What was your first impression? I guess when you got here, the scene was different, obviously, but in kind of what way? What was the thing that struck you about that time?
Well, when I moved here, I had friends that were going to Cal Arts, so I wasn't a student there, but I would hang out there, and so I was pretty immediately got exposure to the program at Cal Arts and Michael Asher and Bolasari and that crowd of people.
And that's kind of how you start this sort of there's a long association between you and those artists. Is that kind of when that started?
Yeah, it started that way. I didn't know those people right away, but eventually I got to know those people and started working for a lot of them. But the real story about when I first got here was I moved here with a suitcase and $2,000, and that was it. I didn't know anybody.
You didn't even have a friend's couch to flop on or anything?
No.
Wow.
I was in MacArthur Park at first.
Oh, that's
bold,
man. That's bold.
And I thought I was in a different country.
Yeah.
Everybody was speaking Spanish. It was all Mexican Americans there. And the cockroaches were about a foot long, I think. But I got a job pretty quick knowing how to paint signs. Because, LA is definitely a sign painter's kind of town, especially then when most times were painted, but you have this climate where you can easily paint,
all year
especially
round.
if you do outside work like I did. I was specializing in outdoor wall paintings and billboards.
Yeah.
So I had a job just a few days after I arrived to L.A. I was working full time immediately. The only catch was I got this job right away, and I was working there, and there's the peeps. Every once in a while on Fridays, these guys would show up in like military type outfits and look like they were collecting money from other people working there. And it turned out the company was owned by Scientologists.
Whoa.
And I had never even heard of Scientologists. I was saying, who are these guys in these military outfits? And I was asking the other people working there, I said, well, they take like half of our income.
Whoa.
Like people in Scientology were like handing over half of what they make to the church.
Whoa.
And they'd be showing up to collect.
Whoa. Did the Scientologists ever approach you and be like, have you thought about...
No, actually, I got fired from the company before they could do that. The guy that was the owner of the company was away out of the state for some reason, and I worked there for a few weeks before the guy even showed up. And he didn't... And when he showed up, he didn't like me that much. He didn't think I was painting fast enough or something. But that was fine with me because I didn't like the guy either. He was kind of a jerk. So when I left him, I got a job with this guy who was also a Scientologist, but he was really cool. He never like talked to me about it or tried to recruit me into the church. And he was a wall dog, which is all he did was paint wall signs.
Yeah.
And we just drove around LA in a van and we were painting mainly Vietnamese furniture stores.
You never know what industry you're going to get into.
And they would pay cash.
Yeah.
The Vietnamese. And we'd be there, and he had this formula, like there would be a long line of signs and squares that say corner group, and it would have a price, and it would say beds prices, couch prices, and we paint the same thing at each place. But they wanted it to look cheap. We paint them real fast so that they didn't look sophisticated, the signs.
Yeah.
And this was another concept I found out when I moved to LA was a lot of the clients or the customers were running businesses, they wanted signs that looked kind of crummy.
Yeah.
Because when the signs looked crummy, that signified that their products or whatever they're trying to sell were cheap.
Yeah.
Even though they weren't really cheap. It was all a ruse just to make people think they're cheap because it looked like a crummy business. So the stuff in here must be cheap.
And then they don't sweep up too much or anything like that, right?
Yeah, they're in these old buildings.
So when are you producing your own work at this time, or is this just like the years where you're just trying to live hand to mouth and you don't have a chance to make much of your own stuff?
Yeah, it goes up and down.
Right.
And,
yeah, I've experienced
sometimes
that.
when I'm super busy, and other times when it's dead, and you're wondering how you're going to pay the bills.
Yeah.
I think that goes to being in business for yourself.
Yeah.
Unless you luck out and you do have like real steady work all the time.
Yeah.
Especially when you work for artists, because there's times when everybody needs stuff, and then other times when how come there's no work? Where is the work at? Like sometimes I worked for Lawrence Weiner where I was doing like a bunch of work for him, one thing after another, and then go for a year or so with no work for him. But as far as my own work goes, there were more times in the past when I had time to do my own paintings, and I would do them on my own time. And then the plan was to have enough paintings around so that if there was an opportunity to show them, then I could tell the person, "Hey, I got the work; it's all ready to go."
Yeah,
you don't even have to make it, and
right.
The people like that.
Oh,
that
definitely. Yeah.
Although the people I'm talking about are other artists. Because I've never had a show at a commercial gallery or one-person show at a commercial gallery. Mm-hmm. I've always just had shows at artist-run spaces.
And this kind of brings me to like an interesting point about you in particular, is because you have that 1 foot in the art world on the business side, and you have 1 foot in the being the artist over here. Does that... And I didn't know before today that you had this education in arts administration, too. did that really serve you over the years, as far as just like being able to straddle those two things, as opposed to like my job's at the DMV, and then some artists are like that. They just they want to have that job where they can just turn their mind off, do their hours, and then go home and do their work.
Well, I see that I'm inspired by a lot of the people I work for, and that gives me inspiration to do my own work, even though it's more like a hobby since I have never made a living at it.
That's all of us fun. Almost, by the way. That's like 98% of us.
Yeah, but I've had fun. Like this one place called Paradise Garage that was in Venice. Penty Monconan and Liz Craft were running it, and they're friends of mine. And so I had a show at their space, and then also they were helping run this art fair called Paramount Ranch. And they had me be their artist for the Paramount Ranch shows. And so this was a thing where I made a body of work that I liked, and then I'm working with friends, artists that I liked, and then we're showing the work at these interesting venues, and that whole thing kind of goes together into like a satisfying experience. And they actually, like we were talking about before, about being shocked at selling stuff. They actually were able to sell a few things. Too.
So your work is often described by people as being like irreverently humorous and sometimes political. How do you feel about that? Do you feel like that's what your work is about, or?
Yeah, I think I've been inspired by artists like Balsari and others that use humor a lot in their work. That attracts me, as opposed to like super serious stuff. Yeah, political and humorous work sometimes gets criticized for being too simplistic, but I don't necessarily agree with that. I think, like Warhol did like stuff that was kind of funny. He did stuff that was it was serious too, about electric chairs and stuff like that. Yeah. But a lot of stuff is kind of goofy. Yeah. And no one complains about him. Even Jeff Koons is like pretty goofy kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's a fine line. Do you feel like people complain about?
I think some people complain about this. Don't take it serious. Like this Joseph Kosuth. Oh, okay. Yeah. He would complain about. I have read it. He would complain about work by Ed Ruscha and John Balsari as being too lightweight. They look at comedy or humorous work as being lightweight, as opposed to like Donald Judd as like being heavily theoretical. Yeah. But even Michael Asher, who was doing very theoretical kind of teaching at Cal Arts and having very rigorous critiques of graduate students, he was a very funny guy himself if you just were in conversation with him. Yeah. And I think that's important, is that sometimes artists get too serious about what they're doing, and you gotta, lighten up a little bit. Yeah. And especially in California, where you're supposed to be able to like be a little more mellow and not be in the rat races so much. Yeah. But it seems like a lot of people get into it.
Yeah, about California and LA specific, does it seem like the art scene here is a little bit more open to you, as far as like if you're new coming here, entering into the art world, would it be easier than say like a Detroit or a New York or a Toronto or something like that, or is it harder?
I think what you do is, whatever city it is, you just try to get involved in however you can in the scene. Like I was able to get involved with like doing exhibition graphics. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of it. What it comes down to is, I know it's overused, but the networking idea is the more people you get to know, the more chances are that something's going to come along where somebody you do know says, "Oh, I know a guy that can do that. Norm can do that." Yeah. And that leads to a job, or I'm at the point now where I don't accept all jobs because I'm starting to get lazy. The older I get, the lazier I get. I'm trying to, trying to have some fun before this all comes to an end, right?
Yeah,
It's like I'm 62, and I don't, so I don't have like, I have a limited time, so I got to make use of it.
Yeah, so there's more of an urgency to do your own work too. Is that fun to you? Is that like, I'm gonna make my own work now? Cause
definitely, it's almost like a luxury. I think that's what one of the big attractions about graduate school is that whole idea of like, I have like 2-3 years where I can just focus right in on my work and without much distraction. Even though I know some graduate students have to work part time. Or most of them. But still, it's more of this mindset of like, okay, I have this period where I can focus on what I want to do.
Yeah. You're not afraid to throw punches at Trump and at I don't know, all kinds of various political people like that. And it reminds me kind of like of maybe like Robbie Connell does the same kind of thing. And
yeah, what happened to him? I haven't seen his posters. I think there's still some around, but not as much as they used to. This is like related to the humor thing. It's another way like people sometimes think that political art is too simplistic. It's because it's like a bold graphic thing. It's more like propaganda than art. I've never let that stop me because it doesn't stop the opposition.
Yeah,
the people who are supposed to be resisting. They're doing propaganda all the time, and they don't feel bad. They don't feel hung up about it.
Yeah, we're not allowed to fight back.
Exactly.
I'm glad that you're out there fighting for us then.
Well, have the skill to like do that sort of fighting back. So why not? You know, why should we be restricted just because someone says, "Oh, that's too close to propaganda"? Well, propaganda fighting propaganda, or if they can do it, we can do it.
It also takes somebody pushing the boundary to expand what we can do as artists. I mean, it may be that you're opening up the possibility for more people to come in behind you and do more of that work and be more accepted, you know. So what gave you the idea for the Lunatic Fringe piece?
That's a piece that I had done before, but not using that Waffle House format that I used for...
I didn't see it before. Fringe. What did it look like before?
I did a painting called Lunatic Fringe. It's a painting of the building in Oklahoma that was blown up by Timothy.
Oh, yeah. That the federal building, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I did like a black and white, high contrast painting of the facade of the building that had been blown away. Yeah. And then I had the text Lunatic Fringe floating around the image. But what happened was I was working on a project in Dallas, and I went to a Waffle House because I saw the signs along the highway, and I thought, I should try this out, see what they're like.
Had you heard of it before? Or you just kind of walked into it blind?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because in Detroit or on the West Coast, there's no Waffle House. It seems like it's just a southern
Yeah, I think it is.
Thing.
Yeah.
So I went in there, and it turned out that there was all these people, hunters, that were in there eating waffles and breakfast early in the morning, because I was stopping by in the early morning too to go to the job to get hyped up on waffles and sugar and coffee and all that before they go out and blow away the innocent animals.
Did you feel like a duck when you walked in? Or?
And then I noticed that they had these T-shirts that were camouflage that said Waffle House on them.
Oh.
And I thought this is kind of strange. So I bought one of those. When I came back, I was wearing it around, L.A. And people were going, "Wow, where'd you get that?" So people were very attracted. Yeah, the Waffle House T-shirt.
Yeah.
So then I was looking at it more, and I was saying, then somehow or other I got the idea that the text "lunatic fringe" would fit perfectly into that Waffle House format with these little boxes in a row.
Yeah.
And so I made that up, designed, and I made T-shirts and the wall painting for the show I had at the gallery I was talking about in Venice. Had a wall painting of it.
Yeah.
And then I made T-shirts that I sold at the Paramount Ranch Art Fair. Did you know about the Paramount Ranch?
I didn't know about that.
Yeah, it happened
Not you're wording me up to it right now.
It happened for 3 years, and it was an alternative art space. And it was
I missed that. But that photo of the gallery with the lunatic fringe on it is now like a viral photo. That painting.
It appears so. Yeah, if you Google me or
Waffle House or any of that stuff,
yeah, that comes up.
Yeah,
I guess that's how it works. Like Google, if the more an image is shown, the higher it is on the hierarchy of all the imagery that they have on you. So yeah, that's a popular one.
Right.
But I'm not really interested in doing more. I see it as like just 50 of them, and that's it.
Did you ever stop and think like, okay, wait a minute, like we can't do this art on a T-shirt. We better make it into a poster or a limited edition print or something like that. Did that ever give you pause, or were you just like, no, it's got to be a T-shirt?
Well, it was a wall painting too.
Right.
And there was actually a guy who was interested in buying the wall painting. His name is Wolfson, artist. What's his first name? Wolfson. He's pretty popular right now in New York. His last name is Wolfson.
Oh boy, I don't know everybody. That's for sure.
Jeremiah Wolfson, I think, or something. But he was at the opening.
And
he was talking to the people running the gallery that he wanted to buy it, that wall painting, but it fell through.
Yeah, how would you?
It's site specific.
So
you'd go to his house,
and you got to paint it there, huh?
Yeah, and you'd make it the size that would fit whatever space he wanted to put it in. So site specific.
Yeah, that brings up a lot of the kinds of issues that have been coming up around lots of artists' work that work directly on the wall. Like we've seen, the extreme example, I guess, would be the Banksy pieces where people go and steal a brick wall. You know, have you heard about this stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Where people go out there with a concrete cutter and cut part of a wall out and steal it in the middle of the night.
Yeah, well, it's probably going to happen at ICALA when that show's over. Because of Mike Kelley installation,
I know.
They'll get all cut up, and broken down and cut up, and there'll be these cartoon fragments.
I'm going to be be the guy in the dumpster. I want you to know.
I think the people working
waiting
there,
underneath it, see what comes out. Be covered in drywall dust. I got it.
Yeah. I remember Mocha had a retrospective of Lawrence Weiner, and there were about 100 pieces at the Geffen of his work.
Mm-hmm.
And after that show was over, I noticed that a lot of people at Mocha in their offices would have like little fragments of like the Lawrence Weiner pieces that had been when the piece was demolished.
It's like little pieces of the Berlin Wall, huh?
Right.
Put those into a lucite box and display it on a pedestal and really take all the fun right out of it, right?
Yeah, make it into a precious object.
Yeah.
That we were talking about.
Yeah.
To be worshipped, I guess.
Right. That would make you not so happy, probably, huh? To see those pieces end up in that kind of a display situation, up for auction in 10 years with behind a plexiglass.
Well, I got paid for making the piece.
So you're okay with whatever happens now?
Yeah.
Wow.
If it was my art, maybe it would be.
Well, that's what we're talking about, the lunatic fringe piece. Like, what if that gets painted again? What if it shows up? We don't even know. Maybe part of that wall is somewhere right now. Do you know what happened to it after?
You got painted over, actually.
Oh, it did?
Yeah. Just
So
got
I could
painted out.
feasibly go back there, take that
At that
wall
time.
down, peel the layers of paint
Yeah.
off.
That's interesting. Like
This
a
is
lot
an
of people would
idea.
comment on that, especially when I was doing names of artists on gallery walls before vinyl.
Yeah,
I would go into these galleries and paint the names on the walls.
yeah.
And so every show they'd paint out the name and put another name on. So like you're talking about, the wall would have all these layers.
Yeah, all galleries were like that
Yeah,
back
with
then. Yeah.
names. If you could carve through the layers, you'd get this history of all the artists that had shown at the space.
So there's a piece that we were just looking at that's here in your shop, that's in your other room, which is just layers and layers of vinyl on top of each other, and it's just from cast-offs from stuff that you've done over the years. Same kind of thing, but you've been working on it for lots and lots of years. What is it about that layering process that is like so attractive?
I don't know. It's like leaving your mark or something, and it just keeps growing or over time, and you see like little sections as they get covered up.
Yeah, it has that like timeline effect to it,
Yeah.
right? Where it's like
And there's been a lot of people who have taken photos of it at different times, and so it does change over time too. It's like something that's just a gradual change of imagery that gets new imagery goes over the old and new imagery. I think hand lettering is only done by artists, and that's basically it. So I don't know how long that'll go. Hand painted and hand lettering went for centuries before vinyl came.
yeah.
And now vinyl came, and now that's gone. That started like in 1990. So that's like only been 30 years or so.
And now it's
Now that's
printing, but it's
becoming
also kind of like
obsolete.
laser engraving and
So the technology is moving so fast that the sign painting looks more and more antique, I guess.
yeah.
Like this painting that we did for the show called A Painting That Is Its Own Documentation for Baldassare.
Yeah.
That painting was started in the 60s, and now, it keeps growing as venues that it's shown at get added to the panels. But the seems like the longer it goes, the more and more it looks kind of like old. It gets older and older looking, even though it's a strange piece. It keeps growing because every time it's shown at the venue, that name of the venue gets added on. So when a panel gets filled up, they got to make another panel.
Yeah.
Start another one. And eventually, like, they could fill up a whole museum, in a couple hundred years.
if they,
Not just
if they
part
keep
of a
doing
wall.
it, and if there's still someone around that
That's
can
the
paint
thing.
it.
Like, yeah. And that's another thing people talk. I know it's another thing that talks about death, but it's like when conceptual artists die, like and they're doing site-specific pieces, and they're the ones that have to design like how their pieces fit into spaces. Like,
Yeah.
who's going to do that stuff?
Yeah,
for
well, I
those
mean,
people?
you just redid a Mike Kelley piece that's site-specific, and a new
Yeah,
thing
but
had to be built, and it's several rooms built to certain specifications, and does someone from the Mike Kelley Foundation show up and say this is going to have to be the specs, or
Yeah, well, eventually there's not going to be people that'll paint it. I don't think.
yeah,
There has been some resurgence in some cities in the United States, like of sign painting, specialized sign painting for like retro kind of type applications,
yeah.
where they want something to look retro. But
Interestingly,
in
there's
this one,
it's happening in a couple of cities, especially in the Spanish language market, and Chicago, the south of Chicago, has a resurgence in the Spanish language market, and they just do it like that. They just still paint, and it's not really considered retro. It's just the way they do it.
right. I saw a film that showed some companies in San Francisco and Brooklyn that were more white.
Oh, yeah, and
operated.
those the sign writers.
Yeah, as I'm filming, I think they're going to show it at the ICAs.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
As part of their programming.
Yeah. That's essentially my side hustle now.
Right. So it's like companies that want that look. They don't want vinyl or they don't want inkjet on vinyl. But that's a very specialized thing. And they have to pay more for it, too.
Sure.
That's what caused the downfall of sign painting in the first place. Is vinyl was a lot cheaper to make a commercial sign than hand
Yeah,
painting.
you didn't have to have any skill. I mean, you could teach someone to transfer vinyl in a day.
Yeah, I had these students from, like I said, grad schools coming to show them how to do it. I was calling it the 5-minute school of vinyl application.
You got it down from one day to the 5 minutes.
Yeah, 5 minutes.
Now go knock them dead, kid. Get out of here.
Right. And they could go do it.
Yeah.
Put it up themselves.
So, if you were to ever listen to a podcast, I don't know if you do or not, but if you ever were... Oh, you do?
Well, I haven't lately because I've been so busy.
Maybe you'll check ours out.
Okay.
That would be cool. But if you did want to hear an artist, an LA artist that you think would be great on a podcast, who would it be? Who would you like us to interview, you know?
I think Karen Carson, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
She could tell you a lot of stories. And she's someone that's like under appreciated in the art world.
Yeah.
She's a really good artist, but for some reason she's never, she's in this show too right now. At the ICA.
Yeah. Gnarly. Well, thanks for being on our show with us.
You're welcome.
We really appreciate it. And best of luck, especially with those reviewers on the ICA show.
No, I'm actually, I want feedback. After all that work, it's like, okay, I get some real opinions, not just praise, a slap on the back or something.
Yeah. That was Norm Laich, everybody, a true piece of LA art history, past and present. If you have comments or suggestions for us at Art Traffic, hit us up in the DMs at Art Traffic LA or email us at arttrafficpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.